Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where today we explore who taught Elvis Presley karate. Well, we're going to take a deep dive into that by looking at one very specific artifact, and we're going to do that as soon as we come back from this song, which is a tribute to Elvis and his generosity when, during his very last concert at the Hilton in Las Vegas, Elvis gave away his heart. And that's the name of this song. He gave away his heart.
Midnight lights, rhinestone fire, Arabian soup, burning with desire. He hit the stage like thunder rolls. Vegas shook and the story unfolds. Charlie's birthday, crowd went wild. He cracked a joke, then sang with style. But just before he sang Hurt So Deep, he stopped the show and made us weep. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. Black in hair, the man stepped near. Elvis smiled, the crowd could hear. Thanks to you, we raised the light. 17,000 hearts took flight, then back behind the velvet door, he gave away a little more. Music ring, a boxcar shine, a suit that held his sacred time. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. He didn't need applause to know his worth. He gave away his soul in Vegas mirth. Not just a king, but something more. A man who knew what hearts were for. Gave away his heart, not just a soul. Pieces of love where the brave belong. Ritual gifts from the man backstage. He saved the hurting, he the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I'll never be the same. I was there, I saw the rings, I saw the light. Gave away his heart, and it burned so bright.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and we listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to learn about the man, or a very small portion about the man who taught Elvis karate. Now, when Elvis left the United States to travel to Germany for his military service in late 1958, I don't think Elvis had ever heard the term karate before. And I certainly don't believe Elvis had ever attempted to practice it in any way. But while he was in Germany, he met a man named Jürgen Seidel, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But I believe he was a German, based on his name. And he's often credited as the man who introduced karate to Germany. So he had been to someplace else. I don't know exactly where, because I haven't really looked too far into Seidel yet. We're just getting introduced to him during this episode through one specific artifact. But he learned this somewhere, this karate, outside of Germany, and he brought it back into Germany. And he was seen as an expert at karate. And Elvis met him while he was stationed in Bad Nauheim, which was like the second, maybe third place that he was at in Germany. That's where he rented a house that was near the army base where he was stationed. And in March 1960, Elvis left the service, the military service, and he returned to the United States. And there's a wonderful story that on his trip back, he had to stop, I believe it was in Scotland, and then grab another plane and then come all the way back to the United States. And while he was there, he did like a press, a short thing with the press, and there was some other military personnel there, and one of them was an Air Force officer, and Elvis and that Air Force officer kissed on the lips, and it was could have been quite a scandal. And that Air Force officer was asked to leave the premises by their commanding officer. And Elvis stopped them and said, no, without this person, there would be no Elvis Presley. So this person is going to stay during the press, the junket that I'm about to do, the press interview, the press conference. And that's because that particular Air Force officer was Marion Keisker, who was the woman who was the secretary at Memphis Recording Studio, who remembered Elvis's name and brought him back up to Sam Phillips when Sam was looking for somebody to sing a particular song. And even though Sam did not like the way Elvis ended up singing that song, he asked Scotty Moore to meet with Elvis and see what he thought about Elvis. And then the next day, they recorded That's All Right, Mama. So it's Marion Keisker that Elvis always credited, with his fame. And he met her on the way back to America from Germany. And when he saw her, she was in her Air Force officer uniform. And she said to him, I don't know whether I should salute you or kiss you. Or no, that's what Elvis said to her. Elvis said to Marion, I don't know whether I should salute you or kiss you. And Marion looked at him and said, both, in that order. And that's what he did. But that's a sidelight to the story that we're telling today about Elvis and his karate. But on that flight back, he had his karate skill with him. And during that first month back, he was extremely busy. And if you've happened to read my book, Colonel and the Boys, you know that Colonel Parker wrote him a letter right at this time. They kind of warned him that some of the boys were making him look bad to the public. And if you've never read that book and you want to read that particular letter from the Colonel, you can. It's for sale on Amazon, and you can find a link in the description below this video so that you could go find that. But Elvis was doing a lot of stuff right then, but he took time out to write a letter. And he wrote a letter to Jürgen, who was still back in Germany. And we could now see that handwritten letter. Now, in the comments, Marion and I, and welcome Marion and Gunn, thank you so much for being here. But Marion and I were just talking in the chat about how to spell Seidel. And you can see here that Elvis has spelled it with a Y, Seydel. And it says, Dear Mr. Seidel, George. So I think his name was probably pronounced Jürgen, but I think that translates to George in English. And that Elvis must have called him George. You know, like when they were practicing and stuff. So, dear Mr. Seidel, George, I wish to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to teach me the basic steps of karate. You have been very patient in teaching me, and I want you to know that I have learned a lot and that I am very satisfied. This little gift is not a payment for the lessons, but just to show my appreciation for your time and patience. Thank you again. I am your friend, Elvis Presley, 3rd Q Karate. Elvis starts by wishing to thank George from the bottom of his heart. And the fact that Elvis has taken the time to write this letter, well, that's really significant because I cannot stress to you how busy Elvis was during this period. Now, we don't know the exact date that he did it. Jürgen kept this letter for his whole life. Most of it. Maybe his whole life. It was it was auctioned off along with other memorabilia that Jürgen had about Elvis. So this is something that he treasured. And he recognized, I believe, that Elvis was a very busy person and that he wrote very few letters. So this was something that was extremely special. And Elvis is thanking George for taking the time to teach him the basic steps of karate. And you can see that Elvis has put karate in quotation marks, underlined it, capitalized it. It's very important to him. He's also written it in, he's printed the letters. The rest of the letter is written in cursive. So karate is special, and it's still something new, and it's something that you wouldn't be able to say in America and people actually understand what you're talking about. This is a word people don't know, and Elvis has set it off with an underline, with the printed letters, with the capital, with the quotation marks. This is not a normal word. This is something that means something special to Elvis. Hi, chillin' in Canada. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Gunn says that it's so cool to see his handwriting. And Marion says it's a beautiful letter. It's so nice. And Marion's also confirming she's looked it up and it's definitely Seydel. You can see that although his handwriting is maybe better than you expect, it's slightly slanted upwards, which I think is common to a lot of us that write on unlined paper. This is an unlined piece of paper that he's written this note on. And he's thanking George for being very patient in teaching him, which indicates that maybe Elvis wasn't picking this up as quickly as he picked up, say, a song or some of the other hobbies that he's picked up in his life. You'll hear Donna Presley say that whatever Elvis did, he excelled at. And that's true 99% of the time. There's a few things that I think Elvis did not excel at, and therefore he did not pursue, although he was attracted to some of those things. I think karate was something he didn't necessarily excel at immediately. He could see what he could achieve in it, though, and it brought something to him inside that made him want to keep going with it, and he stuck with it like his entire life. So this is one of the most unusual hobbies that Elvis ever has. Most hobbies come and go quickly with Elvis. This has staying power. And it's not something that he was probably good at immediately, which makes it different from his other hobbies. There's something special about karate in and of itself. And Chillin's saying they'd love to see a handwriting analysis of that. Suppose it's out there on the web. I don't think so, because I don't think very many people know about this letter. Like the four of us that are looking at it right now, I mean, there's maybe 200 people in the world, I think, that have ever seen this letter. And only the four of us have ever looked at it as we're looking at it now. Others looked at it to purchase it. And Elvis wants George to know that he's learned a lot. Elvis sees it as valuable that he's learned, and he wants to let George know that that value was there, that as a teacher, he taught, and Elvis absorbed, and that it has meaning for Elvis. And Elvis says, I am very satisfied. That's kind of a strange word to use. He's not happy. He's not unhappy. He's satisfied. And I don't know that satisfied is a word that you associate with Elvis very often. It's not one I think I've heard him say or write very often, or that other people have said in connection with him. So it's kind of a unique word. And Elvis says this little gift is not a payment for the lessons. So there was something with this note. It wasn't just a letter, but we don't know what the gift was. It wasn't part of what was sold, or if it was, it wasn't identified as being the gift from the letter. So we don't know. But he sent something to Jurgen. But he's saying it's not a payment for the lessons, it's a gift. And we know from looking at other gifts that Elvis has given that every gift has a meaning. Every gift has a purpose. And most of the time, Elvis's purpose was to tie in your memory him to you. So he has sent this gift so that even though he and Jurgen are not together in body, that Jurgen will always remember this moment in time when he received the letter and the gift and connect that to Elvis. So Elvis, although he's satisfied with what George has taught him, I think he is not satisfied that George will remember him. He's not satisfied that he left that relationship in a manner that Elvis likes to leave relationships and with when people leave or they have to part. He wants this little ritual so that both parties remember what happened and they understand that this was important to him. And Elvis says he just wants to show his appreciation for Jurgen's time and his patience. And he ends with, I am your friend. Not your friend, Elvis Presley, but I am your friend. So Elvis declares friendship at the end of the letter, not in a way which you might write off as just a standard ending to a letter, he writes out in full, "I am your friend." And third cue, karate. That is Elvis's standing in karate at that time. It's like a belt. You know, we think of karate with belts, which is, I think, somewhat of an Americanized version of karate. Not sure. I don't know a lot about karate. But here they were calling it cue. And Elvis is identifying himself within George's profession, you know, George's wheelhouse, and Elvis is placing himself under George. I am third cue. Now, George is probably first cue. I don't know what the actual numbers are. Maybe they do it the other way and he's eighth cue or something, but whatever the top is, that's what George is, and Elvis is below. And in most relationships that Elvis has, Elvis is always above. So again, he's inverted the relationship and put himself below George and says, you know, in an inferior position, he is the student and George is the teacher. And Marion's saying that Elvis's handwriting looks nice, and that she guesses he took some time to write the letter. And Marion says that she likes the way he makes his little tea. It is very distinct, isn't it? It's that way every time that he makes it. How about that? And Chillin' in Canada is saying the mid-stroke is bold and perfectly aligned. And I believe you're Chillin' is talking about the little T, and yeah, I would agree with that. And it is very distinct on every single little T. And Gunn says that his way of writing I is special, isn't it? It has like a curly Q at the top of the I, and it's not. Normally we think of an I as a line with two lines encasing it at the top and the bottom. This is more like a backwards G or a backwards C, like a backwards small G or a capital C with a curl at the top. Yeah, it's very unique. And it's very distinct from his small L, which I think is where most people have a confusion with their I and their L. And Marion's saying that Elvis underlined the word karate because it shows how much he loves the sport. Yeah, he sets off karate with a whole bunch of stuff, little flourishes, so it's definitely an important word within this note. And Chillin' in Canada is saying a distinct L, which I would agree with again. His L is almost always the same. His small L. Although it's it's similar to his B if you look at the word bottom at the top. And the word basic. You would almost think that's an L. So it's a little sloppy with the B. And Marion's saying the I sometimes looks like a 9. I don't know if he liked numerology at the time. So this was prior to numerology, but that's an interesting observation. It does look like a 9. Yeah, it looks more like a 9 than anything that I said. And then once you see it as a 9 and you look back through, there's a line of 9s right in the middle of the note. I, 999. That is a very interesting way he lined that up. In the three sentences say, teaching me an I, to know that I, a lot, and that I, and the I is lined up on all of those sentences vertically. I don't know that I'd ever noticed any of that if you guys hadn't mentioned any of it. Because I'm always more focused on the words and the meaning. I mean, I did notice that the karate had a lot of, it was different. He had written it differently. And you also notice that when he writes George at the top, he's put it in quotation marks, which indicates it's a nickname. And so that's Elvis's nickname, which is an Americanized Jurgen to George. And I can almost imagine conversations between Elvis and the guys and Jurgen saying that they can't say his name and that they're going to call him George. Like, I can almost see that scene. And that's another one that I can see so clearly. You wonder, why isn't this in any movies? Like, it's never been in a movie or a TV show. Now, you may be wondering what George or Jurgen looks like. And you can see him here. And he's sparring with Elvis. And so this was in Germany while Elvis was learning the karate. This is what he's thanking George for the lessons he's learning right here. And you can see that Elvis has his hands in very karate posture. Like, he's not making fists. He's making, I would call them strong hand postures or strong fingers. I don't know what they're really termed in karate. Now, Jurgen himself is throwing a closed fist. So I think he is not using karate at this moment. I think he's attacking Elvis as if he were like a man on the street. And Elvis is learning to defend himself with the karate. And you can see that he's blocked Jurgen's blow and pushed it to the side. But Elvis has also turned his face to the side, which I believe is something he's not supposed to do. Again, I don't really know karate, but I think one of the points of the exercise is you learn not to turn your face because you trust in your counter blow to be able to ward off the fist that's coming at you. Another interesting note here is that Elvis is not wearing shoes, but Jurgen is. And they're just regular, like, leather men's shoes from the period. They got a heel on them, shoelaces. So these are not some kind of exercise shoe. They're not, he's not going barefoot like you see a lot of karate experts do. He's also wearing a regular pair of pants, and it looks like maybe a polo shirt. And Elvis is wearing like a regular button-down shirt with long sleeves and a regular pair of pants. So these guys are not, they're not wearing gis. This is more like they're practicing. I'm walking down the street and things happen, and I've got to react. Because Elvis isn't going to be in a karate gi when he gets attacked by someone. He's going to be in his regular clothing. And I think at this moment in time, as Elvis learns karate, he's very focused on self-defense. That he and the guys are learning this to ward off those who come at them during Elvis performances and when Elvis is out in public. This isn't so much about learning karate for itself. It's got a purpose to it at this moment. And that's what they're focusing on. At least that's what I'm reading out of this picture. Doesn't mean it's true. So if you guys have opinions and thoughts, make sure you put them in the chat and you put them into the comments. And while you're there, hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure your notifications are on so you'll be notified when I'm on live. And be sure to tell everybody you know that loves Elvis to come and join us here at Hillbilly Cat History, so we can all learn about Elvis and karate and Circle G and all the things that we've been looking at together. And so as we think about this document that we've just looked at, We can see in the document that Elvis, at this moment, and what we also know about this moment in time is that Elvis is no longer just a boy from Tupelo, but he's not the Vegas icon yet. He's not even the movie superstar. He's been in 4 movies. He's about to do some more. But he's not thought of as a movie star in the sense that he's going to be by 1967 when we're looking at the Circle G. He's just returned from the Army, and he's now back in the United States where he has to deal with his mother being gone. He's able to push that off through the busyness at this moment. And of course, he's had to have dealt with the loss of his mother somehow over the last couple of years. But because he's been forced away from home and away from his country, I think that he's mentally been able to completely push that off for a while because of the massive change in venue and the other things that he's been dealing with. But now that he's going to be back in a familiar setting, and he'll eventually return to Graceland for a long period, and then she won't be there, and he's going to have to deal with that. The whole time he was over in Germany, he was terrified that his fame would dissipate and no one would remember him when he got back. And so at this moment, probably as he writes this letter, he's extremely happy because he has not been forgotten and he has been welcomed back with just huge outpourings of affection and love. And while he receives that affection and love, he thinks about his friend that he's left overseas. And he reaches out across the Atlantic to maintain this connection with a man who offered him structure, discipline, and perhaps a sense of inner calm. The karate may be the way he was dealing with the loss of Gladys, that he was able to find an inner calm through the exercises and through the thought process that you really need to instill in yourself if you're going to practice karate long term. So perhaps he found some inner peace in that. And as he's thinking about his own happiness and his good fortune here during March 1960, he reflects back to his friend who brought him some inner peace and taught him a new skill, a skill that he and the guys are still practicing. And so Elvis would have seen this karate not just as a physical discipline, but as a spiritual and emotional anchor. In this letter that we just saw, this is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, written testament that we have from Elvis about his lifelong passion. I don't know that if we have any other written stuff about karate. We know he tries to make a karate movie later. We know he owns a karate institute later. We know he's very invested in learning about karate and practicing karate. But I don't know if we've seen something written actually by him at any other time. Now, how did George or Jurgen feel when he received this gift? Now, Chilton Canada notes that the tails of the lower cases are linear and not rounded or looped in the letter. Let's go back and look. The tails of the lower cases are linear and not rounded or looped. Yeah, I see what you're saying, that you cannot see an open loop like on any of the lowercase f's. And Myriad agrees that in the picture, Elvis is performing a block, not to get hit. And Gunn says that Elvis had enough money to buy people who could defend him, yet he chose to learn how to defend himself like everybody else. And so Elvis was already defending himself before they started karate. He and Red and well, Sonny wasn't really around yet, but he and Red, they were brawlers. Now, Red was much more a brawler than Elvis ever was. Red really enjoyed getting into a fist fight, but Elvis could hold his own. Elvis, there's a thought that Elvis was unable to handle himself physically, or that he was maybe slight of build, or that he was not skilled in fisticuffs. But none of that's true, because when you listen to the others tell their life story, and like Sonny grew up in the projects like Elvis did, and he talks about the gang that he had to hang out with and how it was tough, and how, you know, you had to learn to fight early. Well, all their stories are similar to that. The only one who doesn't tell a story is Elvis, because none of the stories get told till after Elvis is gone, right? Because it's Elvis that's famous, and people are trying to learn about Elvis. And so these others are able to tell their life story, and we hear them. But Elvis's life, he was living in the same spot. So whatever fights they're getting into, Elvis is getting into. He had to be able to handle himself. Now, what they're learning now is how to handle themselves better. They're picking up new skills about it. And I bet Red was super impressed with this karate. And I know Red loved the karate because he practiced it as well, as long as Elvis did. And he was fairly good at it. Elvis used him a lot for demonstrating different sparring techniques. And I think Red incorporated this into his arsenal, and it made him a better bodyguard. And because he enjoyed fighting anyway, it was a big boon to him, is how I think Red felt about it. We don't really know. Never really seen Red talk about it, other than that they practice karate. And Chillin in Canada is saying that he was so lucky to have discovered karate and developed a passion for it throughout his life. And I just find it so interesting because he keeps coming back to it. And everything else he drops, like, there's only a few people that stick with him all the way through his life. And there's only a couple of hobbies that stick with him all the way through his life, and this is one of them. And he has a passion and a love for it that's nearly equal to his passion and love for, say, eating. You know, he loves to eat different kinds of foods. His favorite foods, his comfort foods. And that's probably like the one hobby I could think of that sticks with him his whole life. You might consider fashion a hobby. And he did love his fashion, and he was always on top of it. So, I mean, that could be another one. Although, I don't know how much time he spent thinking about it. Although, I think we could probably say it was a hobby. And he's got this karate. You guys might be able to add a few more hobbies maybe he had throughout his life, but I think a lot of them he gets tired of. Obviously, he'd like cars throughout his life, but he got tired of the car that he, the particular car. He went through a lot of cars and vehicles. And Marion thinks it's much better to be able to defend yourself. And Gunn's also glad that he found karate, spiritual, emotional, and mental. And Marion's saying that Elvis also loved karate because it involves respect and discipline as essential parts. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think another part of it is that fits in with the respect and discipline is the levels, the ordering of yourself by a level within the system. And then some people are above you and some people are below you, but everybody has a spot within the system. And you know where you're going. You're trying to move up to the top. Now let's take a look at this letter, which is in German. So hopefully Marion can read it, but none of the rest of us can. However, I've had it translated. So I'm going to read the English translation. And then Marion can tell us if I got this anywhere close to right. But this is from Jurgen back to Elvis in response to the note and the gift. And he says, "Dear Elvis, thank you very much for your kind letter. I was very pleased to hear from you again. It is wonderful to know that you are continuing your karate training and that you are still thinking of me. I remember our time together with great fondness. You are a dedicated student and showed real interest in the art. I hope you are well and that your career is going as successfully as ever. If you ever return to Germany, I would be happy to see you again. With warm regards, Jürgen Seidel." And Gunn is asking if karate is about having control too. Yeah, I would say that's a big part of it. That you feel that you're in control of your emotions, of your body, of yourself, and therefore you're able to extend control to the world around you. And that's probably something that resonated deeply with Elvis, because there were a lot of portions of his life that, although he had a great impact on, he maybe didn't have full control. I think it's also about teaching you how to deal with those pieces that you don't have control over. So like once he'd signed himself away into a contract, he lost control. But he still had to be able to, live with himself through that period and deal with the lack of control that he had granted to whoever controlled the contract. But this letter from Jürgen, it's very gracious and sincere, and it reflects mutual respect and a shared bond through the martial arts. And it's not just a reply, it's a reaffirmation of their connection across distance and time, which I think is what Elvis was seeking, and that's why he sent the gift with it, his ritual of a gift, to cement that memory into Jürgen's mind, and Jürgen responds, "I thank you for the reminder, but I do remember you. I remember our time. It was important to me as well. And that when I was present with you, I was present. And I noted that you were a dedicated student and you showed real interest in the art. And that even as you think of me, I'm still thinking of you. And that there is a friendship that will always last between us. And that hopefully we can see one another in person again someday, so that we can again share that friendship in person." So it was a very kind letter that Jürgen sent back, and I'm sure Elvis got to read it, and even though it's here in German, I'm sure it was translated for him, and that it would have made him feel good, because that was exactly, I think, what he was trying to... Jürgen's telling him, you succeeded. You sent me the note. I remember. We are friends. Hopefully we see each other again. And Gunn says there's such a difference in having a handwritten letter and one from a typewriter. So this was sold as the letter that, but obviously this is not the letter that Jürgen actually sent. This was a copy of the letter that Jürgen kept with the files, so that he knows what was sent. So this one is typewritten, but I wonder if the one that he sent was handwritten. I don't know. We don't know that because we don't see it. Now, is there a copy of this letter at EPE? I bet there's a good possibility there is, because Elvis didn't throw anything away. So if it made it down to the office and into Vernon's hands, it made it into those file cabinets. And so it's possible that either another typewritten letter that's actually signed by Jürgen, because I would think he would sign it, or a handwritten letter by Jürgen exist within those files. But we don't know. And Marion is saying that she's read Elvis was better than average at karate and deserved a brown belt. Well, he had a black belt by the end. And one of the things that we're going to look at eventually, either in this one-off series I'm doing here or in the Signed, Sealed, and Remembered, are the certificates that Elvis receives as he moves from level to level. I have several of them. Obviously, I don't have them all, but I've got several of them, and they're signed by different people, and different people are there. And there's a few certificates that Elvis signed for other people to move them up through the ranks. So those are interesting as well. So I do have all that stuff, and we'll take a look at it one of these days. But this one was, this episode was kind of to introduce us to Elvis and karate and where it all started, and to Jurgen, who, after Germany, disappears from the story, other than this brief note, these two brief notes that are exchanged between Elvis and George, as well as a gift that we don't know what it was. And Gunn is saying that she's only heard 7 grades of black belt, but she doesn't know. I think Elvis was an 8th grade black belt, is what I want to say the last certificate said. Don't quote me on that, though. So one day we'll pull up the certificates and we'll look and we'll know for sure. And I don't really know how karate works. Again, I'm not a karate expert. I just know what I've read about Elvis being involved in karate. And that really brings us to the end of this particular episode. There are some other pieces, like I've said, that Jurgen auctioned, and that we'll eventually take a look at as well, the ones that I can find. And then you'll know who he was when he pops back up. Now, this picture on screen now of Elvis practicing karate, this would have been in the 1970s. So this was probably 10 years after Elvis wrote that letter to George. But here he is, still practicing karate. And I think that if he had not passed away, there would have been a karate movie in his future. Either one where he was doing the karate, or one where he was directing and producing. I think it would have probably been more that he was directing and producing. Because I feel like when he did his own karate movie, when he was working on that, that's the direction he was headed in. And I had mentioned this the other day in a broadcast, and was asked, who were the people with him that were the wrong crew? Was it Red, Dave, and Sonny? And yes, those guys were involved in the movie for sure. They were going to be featured in the movie. But Jerry Schilling was running the project. And Jerry had brought in some other people, people to do the filming and such. And when you look at those pieces that are still available online, the quality is not there. There's no quality at all. It's almost as if Elvis had just bought cameras and handed them to the guys, and his guys had filmed this, because there's no, in my mind, from what I see, and I'm only basing this off of a lifetime of watching movies and TV, right? This was a very poor quality production that they did. The film was poor quality itself, like the actual physical film that they used, I believe, because the graininess in it is terrible. The focus is not good most of the time. The framing of the pictures is just terrible. You would have been able to fix some of it in editing, but the pieces that were gathered weren't enough to tell the proper story, any kind. So I believe that these were rank amateurs, or they just wasted Elvis's money once they got involved in the project. And that Jerry was not an experienced enough individual to run this project. There was a lot of faith that Elvis put into him, and it was a hobby, but it cost a bunch of money. But I think Elvis learned things from it, and I'm not sure whether he learned that he didn't want to do that or that he was going to have to rethink the whole thing before he did it. But I feel almost certain that from the way that he talked about movies and his lack of interest in continuing the live performances at that moment, were going to lead to some kind of directing or producing something behind the scenes. Although he did love the performance aspect. So he was going to have to bring that in as well. And I think it's a lot like the Circle G. We're seeing him at that moment in 77 when he's still thinking about what's about to happen. And if he'd made it to 78, then we would have seen something like the 68 special. And Gunn is saying, why do you think he had so few microphones and he could afford better? You mean when he was doing the karate movie? Or I think that was all technical aspects, right? That he depended on the technical people to handle, and they brought this equipment and it wasn't sufficient. You know, I don't think he was getting involved on the technical aspect of it. Even when he was producing music, he never, first of all, they never called him a producer, but he didn't get into the technical aspects of it. He would talk in regular, like layman's terms with the musicians. I like what you did here. Can you make it sound a little faster? Can you do that? And he would talk it through with them, and then they would change the performance. And then he would tell the producer, the actual producer, I would like it to be sound richer here. I would like more sound here. And then the producer was doing that. But would Elvis go in and move the dials? No, he didn't know any of that. And he didn't necessarily know how to play several of the instruments. So he wouldn't have told the musicians how to play the instruments. He just described what he wanted. And I think that's what he was going with here, but that Jerry wasn't strong enough in the industry at this point in time, in the industry knowledge. Didn't have enough experience to make that happen. Now, if Elvis had brought in a seasoned director or another seasoned producer and said, and he'd been able to talk them into this and say, I want to make this movie, and they had bought in, well, then it would have been a whole different experience. And he would have probably learned a lot and moved on from that. But I think he tried to do it as a hobby, and that was kind of the issue. And Gunn's saying that he should have known better if it was his dream. And I think it was a hobby, not as much of a dream. I think it was something he was toying with. And that, and again, we really need to go through and lay out that timeline of that period because it gets confused. Just like we did with Circle G. We're now at a point in Circle G where we're seeing that a lot of the stories that are told by the guys, they have the wrong time frame on them. And that confuses the timeline, and therefore it confuses the reason that Elvis was doing this or that. Like a claim that the Colonel made the deal for clam bake so that he could get Elvis off the ranch. Ranch hadn't even been bought when they made the deal for clam bake. So that is a misreading of the time period. But when you're remembering the time period 30 or 40 years later, or even 10 years later, and you're telling it to someone for a book, then it all kind of blends together. And they get this confused. And I think it's the same in the 70s. There's a lot of confused timelines, but around this period, he's also doing this deal with the racquetball court that involves Joe Esposito and Dr. Nick. And it's another project that I think destroys Elvis's trust in those around him. And I think that the quality and product from the karate movie was a similar project. It disappointed him and therefore caused him to have trust questions about the people that are involved in it. because this isn't the end product that should have come from the money that he put out. And it's the same with the racquetball courts. He puts money out, and then things are done, and this is not what was talked about or intended. And so we can get into all those details in a different, I mean, we definitely are going to do the 70s at some point. But I think that the karate thing becomes part of that there is a lot of disappointment in Elvis's life about the people that are around him, especially around 1975 and then into 76 and then 77. He's at this point where things are going to have to change. And I think you could see a similar pattern 1 decade before in 65, 66, and 67. It's almost exactly the same pattern. It's just the movies instead of the tours. And it's different hobbies. And like one of those hobbies was the slot cars. And the slot cars is destroyed as a hobby because the guys can't get along together. Well, not doing the slot cars doesn't mean the guys get along any better. So for the next 10 years, they're, of course, getting worse and worse with each other. And then he's very happy to get back into the live performances, but he gets tired of them, just like he did the movies. So we see like the same cycles repeating is what I see. Could be wrong. That's why I bring you guys in to tell me what you guys think, and let me know your thoughts about it in the chat and in the comments. And Gunn saying she thought it was meant to be a real movie. Well, I think it was. I think Elvis meant it to be a real movie, and then Elvis saw some of the outtakes, and Elvis himself, I don't think, was feeling well when some of them were taken. He does not look good to me in them. And he looks a little out of it in some of them. And some people would say that's signs of prescription abuse, but I think it's signs of prescription use. Like he's in pain and he's using a pain prescription, and it's possible he didn't use anything, and maybe he just was in pain at that moment, or he was just out of sorts. But he doesn't look his best in any of those. But it's not just that he doesn't look his best. The whole thing is very amateur, at least in my opinion. And so I think that really disappointed him, and he just decided to act, like, I'm sure he was getting issues from Burden about spending the money, and he just decided to axe the project. But it all started out here with Jurgen, and he did find peace and some kind of inner release from inner turmoil through the practice of karate. And I think it did help him get rid of a lot of his excess energy and anxiety when he was younger. Like, I think he slows down into the 70s. But in the 60s, in the 50s, he was very anxious and he was wired all the time. And in the 60s, he's got that, I think, because of the amphetamine use to some degree. And this, the exercises help him calm all that down. And Marion says that she thinks the karate film quality was really bad and never thought this material should be used for a movie. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it was test footage, that's one thing, but I don't think he thought of it as test footage. But we have reached the end of this hour. And so I am going to have to leave you guys on this thought. Although Gunn says he laughs a lot and he seems interested, though. Yeah, he did seem very interested while he was there. So that's what I believe would have made it a great movie if he'd come back to it. He had the interest and the love for it, and it shone through, and we would all love to see a movie where Elvis is showing us something that he loves. At least I think we would have. But today, I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys with a song as we close down this episode. And in this song, we're going to talk about his heart's desire and what he was looking to do on the Circle G, and probably one of the things he might have been thinking about while he was practicing karate. About being a whole person, bringing in a wife and children and a family, and living all of that as a whole that he'd be able to do because he found the inner peace through the karate. And this song is called His Heart's Desire.
His time came too early, the curtain fell too fast. Before he was ready, before we could grasp the man behind the myth, the ache behind the fame. He wanted something simple, not fortune, not acclaim. 6'3", the threats came down like rain. He spoke of love, not fear, through the shadow and the strain. I wanna live to be old, he said with quiet grace, to remember her love and see our children's face. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given it his best. No mansion in the sky, no diamond parade, just the warmth of a hand and the life they made. A whisper of laughter, a child's sleepy sigh, that was the dream he carried inside. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man